Welcome back to another evening of shared tales and ancient mysteries. Tonight, we gather in the great library of Oxenfurt Academy, where the winter wind howls outside the thick stone walls, but inside, the fire burns warm and bright. I am Professor Aldric Thorne, and for 40 years I have studied the old texts, the forgotten prophecies, and the bloodlines that shape our world. Tonight, I will tell you of the elder blood of a child born to fulfill ancient destiny and of powers that can unmake reality itself. So settle yourselves comfortably, my young scholars. Pour yourself a cup of mulled wine from the pot by the hearth. Let the firelight dance across these old pages, and let me take you back, far back, to a time before our time, to the very beginning of this tale. Our story begins not in this world, but between worlds. You see, long ago, longer than any living memory can reach, longer than even the elves remember clearly, there occurred what we call the conjunction of the spheres. Imagine, if you will, that our world is but one bubble floating in an endless sea of bubbles. Each bubble is a reality, a dimension, a place where life grows and thrives in its own way. These bubbles normally drift apart, separate and distinct, never touching. But 1,500 years ago, something happened. Some great cosmic force, some alignment of powers beyond our understanding, caused these bubbles to collide. For a brief moment in the grand span of existence, the walls between worlds grew thin as morning mist. And through those thin places, things passed from one reality to another. Monsters came through. Creatures that had never walked our soil suddenly found themselves here, confused and hungry. The fiends, the griffins, the draconids, all the beasts that witches now hunt, they came from elsewhere. They were not born of our world, but became part of it during that great collision. But monsters were not the only travelers. People came through as well. The elves, the beautiful, terrible, immortal elves, they too were refugees from dying worlds. They arrived in our realm and found it young and empty, ready to be claimed. They built their cities of white stone and crystal. They sang their songs that could make the very earth weep with longing. For thousands of years, they were the masters of this world. And among the elves, there were those with special gifts. The Ensefern, they were called. The knowing ones, elves who could touch magic as easily as you might touch water, who could see the currents of fate and time, who could walk between the thin places that still remained after the conjunction ended. One of these gifted ones was Lara Dorren Shiadhal. Ah, Lara, even now, so many centuries after her death, her name carries weight. She was beautiful beyond the telling of it, they say. Hair like spun gold, eyes that held the color of spring meadows, and a voice that could charm birds from the sky. But more than her beauty, it was her power that set her apart. She was among the most gifted of the Ensefern, able to work magic that other elves could only dream of performing. Lara lived in a time when elves still ruled the lands we now call the Northern Kingdoms. Humans had arrived more recently, also refugees from the conjunction, but they were fewer and weaker then. The elves looked upon humans with a mixture of pity and contempt. Short-lived creatures breeding rapidly, spreading across the land like weeds. There was tension, yes, but not yet the open hatred that would come later. His name was Cregennan of Lot, and he was a mage, a human mage, but gifted nonetheless. He had come to study with the elven masters, to learn the ancient ways of magic that humans were only beginning to understand. And when Lara met him, something sparked between them, something that transcended the boundaries of race and expectation. The elves were horrified. How could one of their finest, one of the knowing ones, lower herself to love a human, a creature who would be dead of old age before she had even reached her prime? It was unthinkable. It was betrayal. The human communities were little better in their reaction. Cregennan was accused of using enchantments, of bewitching the elf maiden for his own ambition. But Lara and Cregennan did not care. They loved each other with a passion that burned brighter than the scorn heaped upon them. They fled together, leaving behind their people, seeking some place where they might simply be together in peace. They found refuge in the hills near what is now called Redania. There, in a small cottage hidden among ancient forests, they made a life together. And there, Lara became pregnant. This was rare, you understand. Elves and humans could produce children together, but it happened seldom. The elven blood and human blood did not mix easily. But Lara carried within her something special, something that would mark her line forever. The elder blood, we call it now, though it had no name then. It was the pure essence of the Severn gift, concentrated and powerful, a genetic legacy that would pass down through generations. But their peace was not to last. The world outside their hidden cottage grew more dangerous. Tensions between elves and humans escalated into violence, raids and counter-raids, burnings and reprisals. The wars that would eventually drive the elves from their kingdoms were beginning. A group of humans, rabid with hatred for all elven kind, discovered Lara and Cregennan's hiding place. They came in the night with torches and pitchforks, screaming about abomination and unnatural unions. Cregennan tried to defend his love and their unborn child. He cast what spells he could, tried to hold off the mob long enough for Lara to escape. But there were too many. They cut him down in the doorway of their home. Lara, heavily pregnant, fled into the winter forest. She ran through the snow, her feet leaving bloody prints, her heart breaking with every step that took her further from Cregennan's body. The cold took her before the mob could. They found her, 3 days later, frozen beneath a pine tree, her arms wrapped around her swollen belly, trying to keep her unborn child warm, even as death claimed her. But the child lived. A local healer, braver or more compassionate than the rest, cut the babe from Lara's frozen womb, a daughter, half elf, half human, carrying in her blood the concentrated power of the Severn. The healer took the child and disappeared, hiding her away from those who would kill her for her mixed heritage. That child survived. She grew, and eventually she had children of her own. And through those children, Lara's bloodline continued spreading through human nobility like threads of gold through plain cloth. Most who carried the blood never knew it. The power lay dormant, sleeping hoping, waiting for the right combination of factors to awaken it. You see, among the elves there lived a sage named Ithlin Agli. She possessed the gift of true prophecy, that rarest and most terrible of abilities. Shortly after Lara's death, Ithlin fell into a trance that lasted 3 days and 3 nights. When she woke, she spoke words that were carefully recorded, words that would echo through the centuries. "The time of contempt approaches," she said, her voice distant and strange. "Elves and humans will slaughter each other in fields running red with blood. Kingdoms will burn. The world will drown in chaos and destruction. But from the seed of Lara Dorren will come a child," Ithlin continued. "A child born of elder blood, stronger than any who came before. This child will have the power to travel between worlds, to move through time like water, to reshape reality with a word or a scream. The world will die in frost and be reborn in a new sun. The child of elder blood will stand at the threshold, holding the gate between salvation and destruction. What she chooses will echo through all the spheres, through all of time. She is the end and the beginning. She is the swallow who flies between worlds." Then Ithlin collapsed, and she never prophesied again. Some say the vision broke something in her mind, that seeing so far into the future and across so many possibilities was too much for even her gifted sight to bear. The prophecy was recorded in the oldest books, passed down through the generations of elves who still remembered. But as the centuries passed and humans drove the elves further from their lands, the prophecy was largely forgotten by the short-lived human race. It became a footnote in obscure texts, a curiosity for scholars like myself to puzzle over. But the elves did not forget. Neither did certain other beings who I will tell you about shortly. They watched and waited, tracking the bloodline of Lara Dorren through the human royal houses. They knew that one day the prophecy would manifest. The child of the elder blood would be born. The bloodline was traced carefully by those who knew to look for it. It appeared in the royal house of Sintra, that proud island kingdom with its lions and its fierce traditions. Through Princess Adalia, through Queen Tero, the blood passed, diluted but present, waiting for the right moment to awaken in full force. And this is where we must pause in our tale for tonight, my dear friends, for what comes next requires its own telling, its own chapter in this long and complex story. We have set the stage. We have learned of the conjunction of Lara and Cregenan's doomed love, of the bloodline they created, and of Ithlin's prophecy that a child would come who could reshape worlds. The fire burns lower now. The wine has warmed your bellies, and the story has, I hope, captured your interest. We will continue tomorrow evening, when I will tell you of Princess Pavetta of Sintra, of a feast that nearly ended in disaster, and of a witcher named Geralt who claimed a most unusual reward. For now, rest well. Dream of times long past and powers beyond imagining. And know that every word I have told you tonight is true, drawn from the most ancient and reliable sources. Until tomorrow then, my young scholars. May your studies be fruitful and your sleep be peaceful. Welcome back, my dear friends, to our fireside gathering. I trust you slept well and have returned eager to hear more of this tale. The fire has been freshly stoked, and I have prepared a pot of spiced tea that fills the library with the scent of cinnamon and cloves. Pour yourself a cup, settle into the worn leather chairs that have held generations of students, and let us continue. Last night, I told you of Lara Dorren and the beginning of the elder bloodline. Tonight, I must explain to you what the elder blood actually is, what powers it grants, and why so many have sought to control it throughout history. This is complex material, full of magical theory and dangerous knowledge, but I will do my best to make it clear. You see, when most people speak of magic, they speak of the manipulation of elemental forces, fire, water, earth, air, the channeling of chaos through signs and spells. This is the magic that sorceresses and sorcerers learn at places like Aretusa or Banard. It is powerful, certainly, but it is also limited. It works within the rules of this world, this dimension, this single reality. The Elder Blood, that genetic legacy from Lara Dorren and the ancient Severn, grants abilities that transcend the normal boundaries of magic. It is not simply power, though power it certainly brings. It is access to the spaces between worlds, to the flow of time itself, to the very fabric that holds reality together. Let me try to explain this more simply. Imagine that our world is a room in a vast house. Most people live their entire lives in that one room, never knowing that other rooms exist. Mages can, with effort, sometimes peer through the keyhole into adjacent rooms. They can sense other dimensions, other possibilities, but they cannot reach them. Someone with active elder blood can open the doors. They can walk from room to room, from world to world, as easily as you might walk from this library to the courtyard outside. They can step sideways through reality and emerge somewhere else entirely. But it is more than just travel. The elder blood grants other abilities as well, all of them connected to this fundamental power over the boundaries of existence. The first and most dramatic is what we call the scream. When someone with elder blood experiences extreme emotion, particularly fear or rage, they can release a burst of pure force that originates from somewhere beyond this reality. It is not a spell that can be blocked or countered. It is not fire or lightning or any familiar form of magic. It is simply force, tearing through the world like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples of destruction in all directions. Witnesses to these screams describe it differently each time. Some say the air itself seems to shatter like glass. Others report feeling as if gravity reversed, or time stopped, or the world tilted on its axis for a brief, horrible moment. The results are always devastating. Stone walls crack. The ground splits open. People are thrown like leaves in a storm. And at the center of it all stands the one with elder blood, often unaware of what they have done, terrified by their own power. The second ability is more subtle, but potentially more dangerous. Those with elder blood can sometimes see through time, Not clearly, not like reading a book, but in flashes and fragments. They dream of things that have not yet happened. They sense choices before they must be made. This is not prophecy like Ithlin's gift. It is more instinctive, more personal. A feeling of what might be, what could be, what will be if certain paths are taken. The third ability is the most complex. It's the power to open portals, to create doorways between places and times and worlds. Most mages can create portals, yes, but those portals are limited. They connect 2 points in the same world, and they require great concentration and energy to maintain. Someone with fully awakened elder blood can open portals that reach across dimensions. They can step from our world into the realm of the NL, or into the desert worlds, or into realities that have no name and no map. And most terrifyingly, they can do this instinctively, without training, sometimes without even meaning to. In moments of panic or need, they can simply vanish, pulled sideways through reality to somewhere else. Now, you might be wondering why everyone with Lara Dorren's bloodline does not demonstrate these abilities. The answer is both simple and complicated. The elder blood is like a recessive trait. It passes through generations, invisible and dormant. Two people who carry the blood might produce children who show no sign of it at all. Or one parent with the blood and one without might have a child in whom it awakens fully. There seems to be no clear pattern to when and how the blood manifests. Scholars far wiser than I have tried to map the genetics to predict where the blood will awaken next, but it remains stubbornly unpredictable. Some carriers show minor abilities, a slight magical talent and unusual intuition. Others show nothing at all their entire lives. And then once in a generation or once in several generations, a child is born in whom the blood awakens completely. These are the ones who can truly use the Elder Blood's gifts. These are the ones who fulfill Ithlin's prophecy, who hold the power to change worlds, and these are the ones that various factions throughout history have sought to capture, to control, to use for their own purposes. First, there are the elves themselves, or rather, certain groups of elves. Not all elves care about the elder blood. Most are simply trying to survive in a world increasingly dominated by humans. But there are some, the Enseverna, who remember the old days, who believe that the elder blood is their birthright, stolen by humans when Lara mixed her pure elven heritage with Cregennin's human blood. These elves have worked for centuries to try to reclaim the blood. They track the bloodline, they observe the carriers, and they wait for opportunities to bring that power back into elven hands. Some of their methods have been gentle, offering aid and education. Others have been far less pleasant. Then there is the Lodge of Sorceresses. This is a secret organization formed several centuries ago by the most powerful female mages in the north. They work in shadow, manipulating politics and power from behind the scenes. They believe, quite rightly, that those who control magic control the world. When the Lodge learned of the Elder Blood's existence, they became obsessed with it. Here was power beyond anything they could achieve through normal magical training, power that could potentially reshape reality itself. They wanted it desperately, but they could not simply steal it. The elder blood is genetic, passed through bloodlines, so the Lodge developed a different approach. They would breed it. They would identify carriers, arrange marriages, manipulate romances, all with the goal of producing a child in whom the blood awakened fully. A child they could then raise, train, and control. This breeding program has been ongoing for generations. Most of the people involved have no idea they are part of it. They think their marriages are matters of politics or love, never knowing that the Lodge has carefully arranged for 2 carriers of Lara's blood to produce offspring together. It is a cold, calculating approach. The Lodge sees people as breeding stock, as tools to be used in pursuit of ultimate power. They justify it by saying they will use that power for good, to bring peace and stability to the world. Perhaps they even believe it. But the arrogance of thinking they should control such power, the willingness to treat human lives as pieces in their game, this reveals much about their true nature. And then there is the third faction, the most dangerous and most mysterious. They are called the Wild Hunt, though that name barely hints at what they truly are. I will tell you more about them in depth later, but for now, know this. They are elves, but not from this world. They come from another dimension, another reality that collided with ours during the conjunction. They are called the NL, and they have been hunting carriers of the elder blood for longer than human memory reaches. The Wild Hunt wants the elder blood for their own purposes, purposes that have nothing to do with helping our world and everything to do with saving theirs. They appear as spectral riders in the sky, omens of death and disaster. They can cross between worlds themselves, but imperfectly, incompletely. They need someone with true elder blood power to open the gates fully, to give them free passage between dimensions. These 3 factions, the Elven Severn, the Lodge of Sorceresses, and the Wild Hunt, have all been tracking Lara's bloodline through the centuries. They have watched and waited, sometimes fighting each other for control, sometimes working in parallel, all seeking the same ultimate prize, a child of elder blood, powerful enough to reshape worlds, young enough to be molded and controlled. Now, I must speak of the dangers inherent in the elder blood itself. For this power is not a simple gift. It is a burden, a curse as much as a blessing. Those with active elder blood often struggle to control it. The power responds to emotion, to stress, to fear. A child with awakening abilities might accidentally open portals in her sleep, might scream and destroy her surroundings without meaning to, might slip between dimensions without knowing how to return. Imagine being a young person and suddenly having access to infinite worlds, infinite possibilities. Imagine the dreams that would plague you, showing you all the different paths your life might take. Imagine feeling the pull of other realities, hearing whispers from beyond this world, sensing things that others cannot see or hear or understand. It would be maddening. Many carriers of elder blood have gone insane from the sheer overwhelming nature of their abilities. They see too much, feel too much, experience too much all at once. Their minds cannot contain the vastness of what the elder blood reveals to them, and there is another danger. The elder blood can be exhausted. Using its powers drains something fundamental from the user. Not mana, not magical energy in the traditional sense, but something deeper, something connected to their very life force. Use the elder blood too much, push it too hard, and it will consume you from the inside out. This is why training is so crucial. A child with elder blood must learn control, must learn to channel the power carefully, to use it sparingly. Without that training, they are a danger to themselves and everyone around them. They are like a torch in a powder room, a single spark away from catastrophic explosion. You might ask, why would anyone want such power if it is so dangerous? The answer is simple, because it is the most powerful force in existence. With fully mastered elder blood abilities, one could do almost anything. Travel to any world, any time. Bend reality to one's will. Escape any prison, defeat any enemy, achieve any goal. It is the ultimate power, the key to everything. And that is precisely why it is so dangerous. Such power in the wrong hands could unmake worlds. In the right hands, it could save them. But determining whose hands are the right ones, that is the question that has plagued philosophers and power seekers for centuries. The prophecy of Ithlin spoke of a child who would hold the fate of worlds in her hands, a child who would face the choice between salvation and destruction. This child would be the most powerful carrier of elder blood ever born, inheriting not just Lara's gift, but the accumulated potential of all the generations that came after her. This child would be the key to everything. And every faction with knowledge of the elder blood has been waiting for her birth, planning for her arrival, preparing to claim her for their own purposes. The fire crackles beside us, dear friends, and I see the hour grows late once more. You look tired, but fascinated, your eyes bright with questions. Good. Questions mean you are thinking, considering, understanding the weight of what I am telling you. Tomorrow night, we will move forward in time. We will speak of Princess Pavetta of Sintra, of a feast that nearly ended in tragedy, and of the moment when the elder blood manifested in a way that could not be ignored or hidden. We will speak of a witcher who claimed a most unusual reward, one that would bind him to destiny itself. But for tonight, go and rest. Think on what you have learned. The elder blood is not simply magic. It is access to the infinite, power over reality itself. It is the most dangerous and most valuable gift in all the worlds, and it is carried in the bloodline of a woman who died for love, frozen in the snow, clutching her unborn child. Her legacy echoes still, my young scholars. Her blood flows still through the generations, waiting for the moment when it will awaken fully in one who can bear its terrible burden. Sleep well, and I will see you tomorrow evening by the fire. Good evening once more, my dear friends. I see you have returned promptly, eager for the next part of our tale. The wine is mulled, the fire burns bright, and outside the wind has picked up, rattling the shutters and making our warm library feel all the more cozy and safe. Come, sit close and let me tell you of a feast that changed the course of history, We must now travel forward in time, past the centuries of waiting and watching to a specific night in a specific place. The year was 1251 by the common reckoning. The place was Sintra, that proud island kingdom known for its fierce warriors and fiercer queens. Queen Calanthe ruled Sintra then, and she was every bit as formidable as the kingdom's reputation. They called her the Lioness, and the name fit her well. She was a warrior queen who had personally led her troops into battle, who had united Sintra through strength and cunning, who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. She was in her prime then, strong and sharp, and absolutely convinced of her own rightness in all matters. Calanthe had a daughter, Princess Pavetta. The girl was 15 years old, beautiful as spring morning, with honey-colored hair and her mother's proud bearing. But there was something else about Pavetta, something that only a few people suspected. She carried the elder blood, descended through her mother's line from Lara Dorren herself. The blood had been dormant in Calanthe, showing no signs of power. But in Pavetta, it was beginning to awaken. Now, Calanthe had decided it was time for her daughter to marry. This was politics, you understand. The way of royal houses. Marriage was alliance, marriage was power, marriage was the forging of bonds between kingdoms. Calanthe had selected Prince Windham of Verdun as the most suitable candidate. He was young, reasonably handsome, heir to a wealthy kingdom. The match made perfect political sense. So Calanthe called for a great feast to celebrate Pavetta's 15th birthday and to announce the betrothal. Nobles from all the northern kingdoms were invited. The great hall of Sintra was decorated with banners and flowers. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats and fine wines. Musicians played in the gallery. It was to be a magnificent celebration, the kind that would be remembered for years to come. The feast began well enough. The nobles arrived in their finest clothes, bearing gifts for the princess. There were speeches and toasts. Young Pavetta sat beside her mother on the dais, smiling dutifully, though those who looked closely might have noticed she seemed distracted, nervous even. She kept glancing toward the doors as if expecting someone. The evening wore on. Course after course was served. The wine flowed freely. The nobles grew louder and more boisterous, as they always do when drink loosens their tongues. And then late in the evening, the great doors of the hall opened once more. He was bent nearly double, twisted by some terrible curse. His armor was battered and ancient. His face, what could be seen of it, was covered in coarse hair like that of a hedgehog or a beast. He wore a helmet with a visor shaped like a boar's snout. When he spoke, his voice was rough, but cultured, the voice of an educated man trapped in a monstrous form. The hall erupted in shock and anger. How dare this creature interrupt a royal feast? How dare he speak of claims and rights? Queen Calanthe rose from her throne, her hand on the sword that she always wore, even to formal occasions. Dunny straightened as much as his twisted spine would allow. "Years ago," he said, "when you were but a child, Your Majesty, before you became queen, your father, King Ragnar, was traveling through the forest when his horse stumbled and threw him into a ravine. He would have died there, broken at the bottom, but I was hunting nearby. I heard his cries, and I pulled him out. I saved his life. Your father," Dunny continued, "in gratitude, invoked the law of surprise. He promised to give me that which he had, but did not know he had. When he returned home, he learned that your mother was with child. That child was you, your majesty. But King Ragnar, being an honorable man, said the law of surprise would pass to your child instead. When the time came, the hall exploded in outrage. Nobles shouted their disbelief. Knights drew their swords. This beast was claiming Princess Pavetta as his reward for saving King Ragnar decades ago. It was madness. It was an insult. It could not be allowed. But Calanthe held up her hand for silence. Her face was pale with fury, but she was too shrewd to simply dismiss the claim out of hand. The law of surprise was sacred, one of the oldest and most binding customs of their land. If Dunny was telling the truth, if King Ragnar truly had invoked it, then the claim had merit, however unwelcome it might be. Dunny reached into his tattered cloak and produced a sealed letter, yellowed with age. Your father's own hand, your majesty, written on the day he returned from the hunt, witnessed by his advisors. Calanthe took the letter. She broke the seal and read it, her jaw tightening with every line. When she finished, she crumpled the parchment in her fist. "Ah, this is authentic," she said through gritted teeth. "My father sealed his handwriting, the witnesses' marks, but I will not honor it. You are cursed, beast. You are unfit to even speak my daughter's name, let alone claim her as bride. Gods, remove this creature from my hall." "I know him, mother," Pavetta interrupted. And now her voice broke with emotion. "I have known him for months. He comes to me in the gardens at night when everyone sleeps. He speaks to me of poetry and philosophy. He makes me laugh. He treats me with respect and kindness. I do not care what form his body takes. I love him." If the previous silence had been shocked, this one was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the stone floor. Princess Pavetta, the prize of Sintra, the girl who was to marry a prince and secure alliance with Verdun, had been meeting secretly with this cursed creature, and she loved him. "No," she said flatly, "I forbid it. The law of surprise does not apply if the one claimed refuses. Pavetta, tell this beast you refuse his claim. We will find you a proper husband, someone worthy of your station." "I will not refuse," Pavetta said, and she moved from behind the high table, walking down the steps toward Dunny. "I choose him, mother. With or without your blessing, I choose him." The nobles erupted again. Some shouted support for Calanthe, saying the girl was clearly bewitched. Others, fewer but vocal, argued that the law of surprise must be honored. Knights drew weapons. The situation was rapidly spiraling toward violence. The knights surged forward. Dunny drew his own sword, old but well-maintained and prepared to defend himself. Pavetta screamed. throwing herself between the knights and her cursed love. And at that moment, something inside her broke open. Pavetta's scream was not just sound. It was force. It was power. It was something from beyond this reality tearing through the fabric of the world. The air around her seemed to shatter like glass. The stone floor cracked beneath her feet. Every window in the great hall exploded outward in a shower of broken shards. The knights were thrown backward as if by a giant invisible hand. They crashed into walls, into tables, into each other. Nobles scrambled for cover as furniture began to levitate, spinning in the air around Pavetta like debris in a whirlwind. Plates and cups flew through the air. Banners tore free from the walls. The very pillars that held up the ceiling groaned and cracked. At the center of it all stood Pavetta, her eyes wide with terror, her hair whipping around her face though there was no wind. She was screaming still, but the scream had become something else, something that resonated with forces no human was meant to touch. The power was tearing through her, tearing through the room, and she had no control over it. People were going to die. The ceiling was going to collapse. The entire hall was going to come crashing down, and Pavetta would kill everyone, including herself and Dunny, because she could not stop what she had started. Into the devastated hall walked a man. He was tall and lean, with white hair tied back from his angular face. His eyes were the color of amber, cat-like and unsettling. He wore a leather jacket and carried 2 swords on his back, one steel, one silver. On his chest was a medallion in the shape of a wolf's head. Geralt moved through the chaos as if it was nothing more than a strong breeze. He walked calmly toward Pavetta, avoiding the flying debris with almost casual grace. When he reached her, he did something unexpected. He embraced her, gently, as a father might embrace a frightened child. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Easy, you're safe. He's safe. Everyone's safe. Just breathe. Just let it go." Something in his voice, in his steady, calm presence, reached through Pavetta's panic. The power began to subside. The flying furniture started to fall. The cracking stones stilled. The terrible pressure in the air eased like a storm passing over. Pavetta collapsed against Geralt, sobbing with exhaustion and fear. Dooney rushed forward, taking her from the witch's arms, holding her close and murmuring reassurances in her ear. The hall was a disaster. Windows shattered, furniture broken, walls cracked. Nobles and knights scattered everywhere in various states of injury and shock. But everyone was alive. Somehow, impossibly, no one had been killed. Queen Calanthe slowly rose from where she had been knocked to the ground. She stared at her daughter, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time. She stared at Dunny, holding Pavetta so carefully despite his monstrous form. And then she looked at Geralt. "Ah, the law of surprise," Geralt repeated. "I saved your hall, your nobles, your daughter. In return, I claim that which you have, but do not know you have." Calanthe's eyes narrowed. She opened her mouth to argue, to refuse, but then she stopped, because she understood the witch's game. He had invoked the same law that Duny had used to claim Pavetta. By doing so, he had legitimized Duny's claim, made it impossible for Calanthe to refuse one without refusing both. And Calanthe might be stubborn and proud, but she was not foolish. She had just witnessed her daughter unleash power that could have killed them all. Power that clearly came from some ancient bloodline, some force she did not understand. Her daughter needed training, needed guidance, and she needed happiness, because that power seemed to respond to emotion. If refusing to honor the law of surprise might trigger another outburst, this time without a witcher present to calm it, then Calanthe could not take that risk. But Geralt was looking at Pavetta, at the way she held Duny, at the glow of happiness breaking through her exhaustion. And he saw something with his witch's enhanced senses, something that perhaps no one else in the hall had noticed yet. The feast ended in chaos and confusion. Repairs were ordered, nobles were tended to by healers, and amid all of this, arrangements were quickly made for Pavetta and Duny to wed. Despite Calanthe's clear reluctance, they were married within the week in a smaller, quieter ceremony, and Calanthe, practical above all else, made the best of it. She declared that Duny was actually Emhyr var Emreis, a cursed prince of Nilfgaard who had been exiled by treachery. It was at least partially true. The curse on Duny would break at midnight on his wedding night, and he would be revealed as a prince after all. Pavetta and Duny seemed genuinely happy. They were given a small estate in the countryside, away from the court, where they could live in peace. And in due time, Pavetta's pregnancy became obvious to all. Geralt returned to his life as a witcher, hunting monsters and wandering the roads. But he did not forget the law of surprise. He did not forget the child that would be born, the child that was now bound to him by ancient custom and his own choice. He did not know then what he had claimed. None of them knew. Not Calanthe, not Pavetta, not even Duny understood the full significance of the child Pavetta carried. But the Elder Blood knew. The power that had erupted from Pavetta that night, that terrible force that had nearly destroyed them all, it was already flowing into the child in her womb, stronger than it had been in Pavetta, concentrated by generations of diluted breeding, finally awakening fully. And she would fulfill Ithlin's prophecy. She would be the most powerful carrier of elder blood in history. She would hold the fate of worlds in her hands. But that part of the tale must wait for tomorrow, my dear friends. The hour grows late, and this chapter of our story is complete. We have witnessed the awakening of the elder blood in Pavetta, the binding of Geralt to his child of surprise, and the beginning of a destiny that will shake the very foundations of reality. Tomorrow, I will tell you of Ciri's birth, of her childhood, and of the tragedy that would set her on the path to becoming the swallow of Ithlin's vision. Rest well, young scholars. The story grows more complex from here, more dangerous, but also more wondrous. Sleep and dream of powers beyond imagining, waiting to be born. Until tomorrow evening, then, May the fire keep you warm, and the tale keep you intrigued. Welcome back, my dear friends, to our continuing tale. The fire burns steadily tonight, and I have brought fresh bread and cheese from the kitchens, for I know you come here straight from your studies with empty bellies. Eat, drink, and settle in. Tonight's chapter is perhaps the most tragic, for we speak now of the fall of kingdoms and the shattering of innocence. When Princess Pavetta gave birth, it was on a night of summer storms. Lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled across the sea like the drums of war. Some said it was an omen. Looking back now, perhaps they were right. The child was a girl, as I told you. They named her Cyrilla Fiona Ellen Rhiannon, a name heavy with royal lineage and expectation. But from the beginning, everyone called her Ciri. Just Ciri, simple and clean. A child's name for a child who would be asked to bear burdens no child should carry. She was beautiful from birth, they say. Hair the color of ash, pale as winter snow. Eyes that shifted between green and gray depending on the light. Small and delicate, but with a strength in her grip that surprised the midwives. When she cried, the sound was powerful, echoing through the halls of the estate where she was born. Already, perhaps, the elder blood was making itself known. Pavetta and Dooney, now known as Emir, loved their daughter fiercely. For the first few years of Ciri's life, they were a happy family. They lived quietly in their countryside estate, away from the politics and intrigue of Calanthe's court. Pavetta would sing to Ciri in the evenings, old elven songs that she somehow knew despite no one teaching them to her. Perhaps the blood remembered, carrying melodies across generations. Emir, freed from his curse, was revealed to be a handsome man, with dark hair and darker eyes. He was gentle with his daughter, teaching her to ride almost before she could walk, telling her stories of distant lands and ancient heroes. He doted on her, this fierce prince who had once been a monster, now utterly captivated by this tiny creature who called him father. Pavetta and Emir decided to travel by ship to visit relatives in Skellige, those islands of fierce warriors and wilder seas. They took a small vessel, just family and a few servants, planning a pleasant voyage across calm summer waters. A storm came up suddenly, they say, though others whisper it was no natural storm. The ship was found weeks later, broken on rocks, empty of all life. Pavetta and Emir had vanished, presumably drowned, their bodies never recovered from the hungry sea. Ciri, who had been left behind with her grandmother Calanthe because she was too young for the journey, suddenly became an orphan at age 5. She did not understand death, not really, not at that age. She kept asking when her mother and father would return. She waited by the windows, watching the road, convinced they would come home any day. Calanthe, the lioness of Sintra, took her granddaughter into her care, and perhaps it was the loss of her own daughter, or perhaps it was genuine love for the child, but Calanthe raised Ciri with a fierce protectiveness. She treated the girl as she would a son, teaching her to be strong, to be fearless, to rule as a queen should rule. Ciri learned statecraft and history. She learned to ride and to fence, though she was still very young. She learned the ways of nobility, how to command respect, how to project authority. Under Calanthe's guidance, she became a proper princess of Sintra, proud and brave, but the elder blood remained dormant in her. There were no outbursts like the one Pavetta had experienced, no floating objects, no cracks in walls, no screams that shattered reality. Ciri seemed, for all appearances, to be a normal, if exceptionally spirited child. Some wondered if perhaps the blood had passed over her. Perhaps it had been diluted too much, spread too thin through the generations. Perhaps Pavetta's display at her betrothal feast had been a one-time occurrence, never to be repeated. The Nilfgaardian Empire, that vast realm to the south, had been growing in power for years. Emperor Emir var Emreis, a different man than Ciri's father, who had taken the same name, led armies that conquered kingdom after kingdom. Nilfgaard was hungry, expansionist, convinced of its own superiority and its manifest destiny to rule the entire continent. The invasion came suddenly, overwhelmingly. The Nilfgaardian armies were vast, well-trained, equipped with the finest weapons and armor. They swept across the border like a black tide, crushing resistance, burning villages, moving with terrible purpose toward the capital city. Calanthe called for aid from the other northern kingdoms. Surely they would see the threat. Surely they would unite against this common enemy. But the other kingdoms were slow to respond, caught up in their own politics and petty feuds. By the time they began to mobilize their forces, it was too late. The Battle of Manadal, they called it later. The last stand of Sintra. Calanthe herself led the troops, riding at the front of her cavalry, the lioness roaring defiance at the enemy. She fought like a woman possessed, cutting down Nilfgaardians by the dozen. Her soldiers fought bravely, desperately, giving everything they had. But they were outnumbered 3-1. The Nilfgaardian ranks seemed endless. For every soldier that fell, 2 more stepped forward to take his place. The northern reinforcements that finally arrived were too few, too scattered, unable to turn the tide. The Tintran army was destroyed. The survivors fled in disarray, and the Nilfgaardian forces pushed forward, marching toward the capital city itself, toward the palace where young Ciri waited with the other nobles who had remained behind. Calanthe returned to the city ahead of the enemy, wounded and exhausted. She had taken a sword cut to her leg that would not stop bleeding. Her armor was dented and torn, but her eyes were still fierce, still calculating, still fighting, even as her body failed her. She ordered the evacuation of the palace. Nobles fled with whatever they could carry. Servants scattered into the countryside. But Calanthe called for Ciri, summoned her granddaughter to her chambers one final time. Ciri came, and she was terrified. She had never seen her grandmother like this, wounded, pale, leaning heavily on her sword, as if it was the only thing keeping her upright. The palace was in chaos around them. Smoke was already rising from the lower city. The enemy would be at the gates within hours. "Cirilla," Calanthe said, and her voice was weak but determined. She gripped her granddaughter's shoulders with bloody hands. "Listen to me carefully. You must flee. You must survive. The Nilfgaardians will try to capture you. They know who you are, what bloodline you carry. They will want to use you, to control you." "No time to explain," Calanthe said. She pulled Ciri close, embracing her fiercely. "Find Geralt of Rivia, the Witcher. He is your destiny, Ciri. Find him. He will protect you when I cannot." "South," Calanthe said. "Flee south. Stay ahead of the armies. Ask for the White Wolf. Others will help you if you speak his name. And Ciri, my little lion cub, be strong. Be brave. Remember that you are the blood of Sintra. Never forget who you are." Those were the last words Calanthe ever spoke to her granddaughter. She sent Ciri away with a small group of loyal soldiers, giving them orders to get the princess to safety no matter the cost. Ciri fled through secret passages beneath the palace, emerging into the city streets just as the Nilfgaardians broke through the main gates. The city was burning now. People ran in panic. Soldiers fought and died in the streets. The world had become chaos and terror. The soldiers tried to protect Ciri, to clear a path for her to escape, but they were spotted by Nilfgaardian scouts. Fighting broke out. One by one, Ciri's protectors fell, buying her precious seconds to run, to hide, to survive. She fled into the narrow alleys of the lower city, her fine dress torn and dirty, her face streaked with tears and ash. Behind her, the palace was burning, her home, her entire life. Everything she had known was being destroyed. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsed in a doorway in some forgotten corner of the city. She was alone, terrified, a 12-year-old girl who had lost everything in the space of a single day. The next weeks were a blur of desperate survival. Ciri moved through the countryside like a ghost, hiding by day, traveling by night. She stole food from farms and orchards. She drank from streams. She avoided roads and villages, terrified of being captured. She was pursued. Nilfgaardian scouts were hunting her specifically. She would see them sometimes in the distance, black-armored riders fanning out across the land, searching. Once they came so close she could hear them talking, discussing where the princess might have gone. She hid in a hollow log, barely breathing, until they passed. Her flight took her into the ancient forest of Broccolon, that dark and mysterious wood where few humans dared to enter. The forest was said to be protected by dryads, tree spirits who killed any man who entered their realm and claimed any woman or girl who wandered in, transforming them into dryads themselves. Ciri was too exhausted and desperate to care about legends. She plunged into the forest, hoping the thick trees and tangled undergrowth would hide her from her pursuers. The dryads found her, of course. They found everyone who entered their forest. But when they brought her before their leader, the ancient dryad named Eithne, something unexpected happened. Eithne looked at Ciri with her ageless eyes, eyes that had seen centuries pass, and she recognized something. The elder blood, perhaps, calling to ancient elven magic, or simply the sight of a child who had lost everything, who needed sanctuary. You may stay here, child, Aithna said in her strange, lilting accent. The forest will protect you. You will become one of us, and you will be safe. It was tempting to stay in Brokalon, to hide from the world, to transform into something other than what she was, to never have to face the terror outside the forest again. That's the end of our story for today. We'll continue in the next episode. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you.